Reverend Bacon, Ann Kramer, and to all of my dear friends at St. Luke's, thank you for inviting me today to speak at this prestigious Creation Care worship service. How good and beautiful it is when friends can dwell together in harmony. Recently, I was asked to speak and to give an introduction to Judaism lecture at a local church. After I was introduced, one woman, she raised her hand and she said, "Rabbi, don't hold anything back. Tell us in one sentence the essence of Jewish theology. We want to immerse ourselves in our sister faith. We want to speak the language of the Jewish people." So I said, okay, here it goes. Every Jewish holiday or event can be summarized just like this. They tried to kill us, we won, so let's eat. Now the truth is, after my first attempt at summarizing Jewish theology in one sentence, I paused and took a deep breath and I said, perhaps the most significant Jewish idea is that we human beings are partners with God in the completion of creation. That's what the Hebrew Bible is all about, a theology that expresses the value that we are all responsible for making this world that we live in much better. But with today's scientific advances, it is still important for a person of faith to believe in the concept of creation. Is it? Do we really believe in a God who created and sustains this world? The truth is that most Jews and most Christians have all but abandoned creation as a theological issue. For we are convinced that the origin of the species and the universe itself is to be explained by scientists rather than by theologians. And sadly, if we have learned anything from this past year, far too few of us ever take the time to listen to what the scientists are actually saying. That, of course, is a sermon for another Sunday. The only people who seem to be interested in creation are the fundamentalists. They're the ones who insist that it be included in the public school curriculum, an act which the Jewish community views, and rightfully so, as a violation of the separation between church and state. We say creation doesn't belong in the public classroom, it belongs in the church or the synagogue. So my friends, here we are in the church. So what is it that we really think about creation? Compounding our difficulty with the notion of creation is the fact that we actually isolate ourselves from intimate contact with the universe. We can't even see the stars at night unless we travel far, far away. When I took my children to Yellowstone 3 years ago, they couldn't believe their eyes. Should not the starry sky fill us with a sense of awe and wonder? The lights of civilization block the sky, and so it's difficult to contemplate the mystery of creation. I often teach that creation is a serious Jewish idea, so we can't leave it in the hands of the fanatics and the fundamentalists. We do not have to take it literally, but we absolutely have to take it seriously. For Judaism holds creation as the foundation of our religious faith. Jewish philosopher Maimonides understands the commandment to both love and fear God to mean that when a person contemplates God's works and God's great and marvelous creatures by study, he or she sees in them wisdom that is without estimate or end, and is immediately filled with love and praise, and longs ardently to know God. And when a person thinks of these mighty matters, he or she realizes that she or he is a minute creature, lowly and obscure, endowed with sight and slender intelligence, standing in the presence of a perfect knowledge. Yes, we are creatures, and creation checks our arrogance and causes us to reflect on our place in the universe. Our theological affirmations of creation as human experience, it gives us a sense of dependence, a response of wonder and trust and gratitude for life and affirmation of this world. So when we read the story of Genesis, we're not just reading a pre-scientific study about the origin of the universe. Genesis is a powerful theology that affirms the whole universe as subordinate and dependent upon God. The universe is good and orderly. We humans hold our possessions in stewardship, deriving from God. Creation is not a single event, but the beginning of an ongoing concern for continuous creation. And we are reminded that if we are truly partners with God in this process of creation, if we are going to be motivated to act ethically to our fellow human beings and to our natural world, then we have to begin with our creation. So my question for you, my dear friends, is how will you open your eyes and how will you see creation? God has created a beautiful world for us, and let's face it, we have been mediocre partners at best. We have failed to address with any substance the moral challenge of our time. Some call it global warming, and others more accurately refer to it as Earth's demise, climate change. Either way, we have not lived up to our end of the covenant. Today, the world faces an environmental threat of unprecedented scope. And reducing air pollution, cleaning up our rivers and streams, protecting the wilderness, they are a part of our Jewish and Christian obligations as stewards of this earth. We have not lived up to our end of the covenant, and that means today we must confess. For the sins we have committed against you, O God, in the careless destruction of creation, for the sin we have committed against you by taking your sacred environment for granted, for the sin we have committed against you by wasting your priceless gifts, your national resources, for the sin we have committed against you by polluting our waters, and the sin we have committed against you by filling heaven with smog, for the sin we have committed against you by coating our beaches with slime, please, God, remove the heart of stone from our flesh and give us a feeling heart. Grant us the wisdom and determination to save our world and to safeguard the garden of life beneath the heavens. The true measure of our repentance is found when we are faced with the same situation and we do not this time repeat our sin. Now, this is a very high standard when it comes to the sins against creation, since so many of the things we do every day can be considered environmental destruction. Nonetheless, this should not stop us from trying to undo the damage that we have already caused to God's world. For many years now, scientists have widely agreed that human activity, principally the burning of oil, natural gas, and coal that release carbon dioxide, are quickly warming our planet. This climate change could result in an average temperature increase between 2.5 and 10.4 degrees in our lifetimes. The impact of such an increase would be vast. Heat waves that could kill the poor, Katrina-like hurricanes becoming regular events, changing agricultural patterns that could cause crop yields to plummet, melting glaciers that could flood coastal areas all over the globe, increasing pandemics like malaria and dysentery. We know well about pandemics this year, don't we? And I don't think that we're clamoring for more. We now have a timeline for when Savannah and Miami will be completely underwater. The facts of global warming are sobering, to say the least. The 5 hottest years on record have all occurred in the last few years. Consider that since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, some 260 years ago, carbon dioxide has increased in the atmosphere by more than 30%. Human activity has unleashed billions of tons of carbon dioxide into the environment, and here in the United States of America, we are the most guilty. The U.S. alone emits 25% of global warming pollution. It causes more carbon dioxide in our atmosphere than any other time in the past 420,000 years. And we should also be concerned about the potential impact of global warming in Israel, the Holy Land. A national assessment concluded by the Israeli government raised the specter of the Mediterranean sea level increases in the narrow coastal strip where some 60% of Israel's population lives. Changes in rainfall patterns that could disrupt agricultural production, and major drops in water supply. The Dead Sea is all but dried up. It's now that scientists are imploring us. They're saying, wake up to the sound of the shofar, the ram's horn, before it's too late. And they have given us such a short window to get a handle on climate change, which is a human condition, before we can't even recognize our own planet. Global warming stands with terrorism as the two greatest threats to planet Earth. Both could imminently eliminate life as we know it. Last week I gave a sermon on terrorism, and this week I would suggest the same message about the environment, that we are sitting on a ticking time bomb. The effects of climate change raise doubts as to whether we can seriously uphold our responsibility as people of faith to pass on a healthy future to our children, to our grandchildren, from one generation to the next. But sadly, when it comes to the other issue of life and death, our environment, America is at the absolute bottom of the list. America, with the greatest consumption, must serve as a leader in saving our world. Sadly, we have chosen convenience over life. Now, there's another reason people of faith should particularly be concerned about climate change. The people who will be most affected will be the poor and the disadvantaged. They will be in the weakest position to adapt to the environmental changes and will surely suffer the most. Justice and equality have always been important to our two congregations, and the more so should we care about the environmental justice, the connection between the degradation of the environment and the impact upon the poor, as well as the unequal distribution of resources between the developed and the undeveloped world. Some have said that we should not take measures to address global warming, that the threats to human life are still uncertain. Now, it's true that threats to human life are not completely certain, but the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, provide some instruction for such a case. Deuteronomy teaches us that when we build a new house, we should erect a fence on the roof so as not to bring blood guilt if anyone should fall from that roof. In other words, we should take action ahead of time to prevent others from any object of potential danger by which a person could become fatally injured, including building a fence on an unprotected flat roof that, at least in ancient days, was used regularly as a room in the house. A person, not just an owner, is obligated in Jewish law to remove any possible danger that could cause fatal harm to another, even if the danger is not imminent. So too with climate change, we must take action now to prevent danger and annihilation within the next 10 years. It is simply wrong for us to say and to live today in a manner that may very well endanger future generations. Now, there's good news that we can very much reverse the effects of climate change. We can slow it down. We can even stop it. And I would suggest that Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions all obligate us to do so. Now, you might be expecting me to use Genesis as my major text for my sermon, but today I want to speak to you for just a few moments about Deuteronomy. For it's in Deuteronomy that we are reminded that we have choices in life. And much of how this next year and the year after plays out will be a direct result of the actions that we take or that we don't take. But the Torah's instruction is clear. I have set before you life and death, therefore choose life, that you and your descendants may live. This remarkable command appears in the final address of Moses to Israel just before Moses is about to die. This is the third in a series of concluding messages that Moses gives in trying to prepare the Israelites for a time when he will no longer be with them, when they will have to make their own decisions. And the speech culminates with a call to renew their covenant, to be faithful to their call to God to be a chosen people, because they had been chosen by God. Israel's choices about life were profoundly important. If Israel really chose life, that is, if they lived by the covenant they affirmed, their choices were important for the whole creation of God. The chosen life, then, is not a badge of honor. Rather, it is the life under appointment, a life under God's call to be instruments of redemption, peace, and reconciliation in the created order. So Moses says, "You who have been chosen, now you choose to live for the sake of life. Make your choices for living in such a way that the whole world may live." And the people say, "We choose life. We choose life. We choose life." This formal remembrance was more than a litany. It was both historic and it was prophecy. It was the powerful reminder of the history of their covenant. It also was a vision of the proudly and profoundly serious and fundamental choice that defined all of their many choices. Either they chose the life of the chosen ones so that they and the world might envision a future life, or their choices led to a certain future death and destruction. Choosing a future with God or choosing the end of all futures. The relevance of this biblical text is startling, as it reminds us that we as God's people must make compelling choices in each and every generation. At a most basic level, we are compelled by our covenant to choose so that our descendants and our world can look toward a bright future. Every human being has been chosen to live. Put another way, the very fact that you and I are here today is not fundamentally our choice. Our birth into this world was itself a gift. People came together and chose for us to be here. But our being here, even at all, is not merely a choice of people. The unique you rests on the history of eons of the evolutionary process that was bringing to life the unique ecosystem that supported and sustained the emergence of human life in our world. Bill Moyer's documentary, Earth on the Edge, communicated much of this message. In the film, the connectedness of our lives with all of creation was dramatically clear. From the great network of plant growth in the tropical rainforest to the tiniest microorganisms, life is a complex whole. My life and your life are bound to the whole of creation. And what is more, the incredible moment of our conception is an event that astounds even the most cynical microbiologist of our day. The genetic selection of the unique you is the product of billions of years of planetary change, so that in a precise moment of time, you were chosen to be you. The Hebrew word chosen, am segulah, also means beloved. So we have been loved into this world by God. You and I are here by the creative and loving act of our God, and that same loving God has given us this beautiful world in which to live. For far too long now, we have treated this planet as if its resources are inexhaustible and its future unlimited. We have acted as if the world is totally ours instead of a gift from our God, and we are now beginning to see the consequences of those choices. Some have chosen the good life, unbridled consumption in a way that is highly destructive and has consequences for our earth. In pouring poisons into our drinking water, in destroying the fertile soil, in killing our animals, in cutting down our rainforests that need to breathe. In the name of the good life, we are every day choosing a future of death and destruction for our world and our children. So we have only one fundamental, compelling choice. It is the one choice that will determine all of the other choices that we make. It is absolutely the bottom line, the baseline choice between life and death. Yet, despite the disappearance of rainforests, the death of thousands of species, and the pollution of our land and air and water, despite the growing consensus that we have already done irreparable harm to our world, despite the fact that we are in danger of opening another nuclear arms race, despite the fact that a deteriorating ecosystem can seriously distort the genetic structure of those who are yet to be born, despite all that we know, so many of us scorn the warnings of the world's top scientists and stand alone against the efforts of other nations to stem the tide of destruction. This cannot go on. At this moment in time, our choices must transcend self-interest. The care of the earth is part of our covenant with our God that determines who we are and what we choose. On this Sabbath, let the voice of the covenant people rise into a mighty and deafening roar so that all of the world may hear us. We stand before choices that will affect generations to come, biblical choices between life and death, between blessing and curse. Shall energy be safe, clean, and sustaining blessing, or shall our consumption of energy be the source of harm and even death to people and to creatures far into the future? The destruction of God's world cannot go on. The time is now, and we cannot rest until we are heard. We choose life. We choose life. We choose life. A life that will ensure that we are working with God, our partner, as a covenant people to ensure a future life for our children and for our world. Amen.